Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm super excited to be talking to you about how to make raw, hypnotic, deep techno in the style of Truncate and Planetary assault systems. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available at the top of the description so you can follow along, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And yeah, let's get started. Alright, so we've got the project file pulled up here. We're at 135 BPM. And the first thing that we have going on are the hi-hats. So you can hear these are pretty straightforward. It's just the shaker and then this big fat 909 hi-hat. And yeah, so you'll notice this isn't the usual open hi-hat like you would have the big sh on the upbeats there. This is just more of like a shorter but still very fat closed 909 hi-hat. And that's something I've noticed in a lot of this style of techno. They use these rather than like the big massive open hi-hats because it just kind of makes things a little bit deeper and kind of more controlled when you have a smaller hi-hat like that, and then the shaker's just doing 16th notes. And then on those you can see that we just have a bit of reverb to give them some space, a bit of drum bus, so here's without that, and here just makes them even fatter. And then finally we just have a high pass filter, and then we have this high percussion. So as you can hear, these are just like some rides. And you can hear they're just in there, you know, adding some nice high end to the track. This really goes a long way to just have something like these in there. If I turn them off, you can hear it adds actually a lot of energy. Even though it's pretty quiet in the mix, it's adding a lot of energy because a lot of that energy is in the high end. So this is just this one sample ride here, and then I also have this one which I made actually with some noise. So it's just a bit of white noise going into a bandpass filter, and that's how you create that sound. And then I also have it going through some chorus to give it a more like metallic texture. And then on the group of those, we just have a bit of echo. You can see this is on dotted eighth notes, so just kind of making these very spacey. Then we just have some saturation to fatten them up and a high pass filter. And that is it for those. And then we have these little noise blasts here, which sound like this. So you can hear that's just in there like. So yeah, something like this goes a long way. You know, it's a nice way to add a percussion that is at once like a nice percussion, but it's also moving and changing, because when you use samples, you really can't get that kind of like morph there where you can really like go in and shape the fabric of the sound the way that you can with noise like this. So what's happening is I'm automating two things. We're automating the release and the sustain. It's just this one oscillator, just white noise there. There is, yeah, the LFO is not doing anything, but you can see it's just these very sharp automations. They're really similar, actually, if you look at it. And that's what creates the sound. And then this it's just going into a drum bus here. And then we just have a high pass filter because you really just want this to be in the highs. And then we have this, which is doing a high end boost. And then we have this noise zap, which sounds like this. So I'll play that with the kick so you can hear how it's fitting into the beat. So you can hear that, yeah, this is just like this nice, very repetitive percussion that just fits into the groove really nicely, just that, like that. So the way this one's being made is it's a little bit more complex, but it's still the same idea where we're just working with some noise in operators. You can see we have one oscillator is white noise, and one oscillator is a sine wave, which is pitched up a bunch. We're using this FM algorithm, so you're not hearing these do any FM together. They're just playing side by side. But then we have this pitch envelope, and so that is really just for the sine wave. There's about it. You can hear that's what gives that the kind of like zappy sound. And then we have this filter, and you can see with the filter it's a bandpass, and we have a really fast envelope, so that's what's creating that pluck. If I turn this off, you can hear that's a big part of the sound. So we have the envelope, but then we also have this really fast LFO on it. And that's also on the pitch of all the oscillators, as well as on the LFO amount. And yeah, so putting an LFO into itself is definitely an interesting idea here. But this just creates that like zapping sound, because you're getting that really, really fast modulation. And there it is. That's like the last thing that really kind of ties it all together. And then you can see we just have a bit of echo, just doing 16th notes as well as some drum bus. The drum bus is really good for these kind of things, like when you make a percussion with a synth like this and it's very mid-rangey, because it really helps to kind of take it away from sounding just like a dry synth and more like an actual percussion sound. Then we just have this little hit. So again, more just kind of smaller percussion. This is kind of in there in the background. And then we have a clap as well. So yeah, that's just kind of adding in some more percussion. These two are really just for the energy, just to kind of add a little bit of like background stuff. If I turn them off, I'm gonna turn them on. You can hear what I'm talking about. Like, it just kind of adds a bit more energy to have these constantly moving percussions like this. Then we have this little thing that I call a plonk, which sounds like this. So all this is, it's just this little synth hit, this little like bloop. And then we're just playing it across 2 octaves. And what this adds is kind of like a nice kind of like almost ambient percussion, if that makes any sense. Like, it's just adding some nice high end, but like not just in the way of like adding like some white noise or something like that. Like, it's high end that's created just by this little bloop. And if I turn it off, you can hear the track's missing something because it needs that. And that's just going through some echo and a bit of drum bass. You can see it's a pretty slow echo. And then we have this evil arp. So here's the MIDI for this. You can see it's just one note. But then what's happening is we have this double arp here. So this is an Ableton rack. And that's what's creating the arpeggio, because you can see that we have basically 2 arpeggiators here. You can see this one's going up +5, so you get some kind of weird voices. And this one has a chord on it. And yeah, it creates this more like complex art versus like if we just got like one and just put it on like. You know, it doesn't quite make the same sound. That's cool too, but this, having the 2 arpeggiators, I think, is what's creating that sound. And then we have this pretty simple FM sound, but then it just has a bit of modulation and automation on it. So you can see, it's just 2 sine waves here creating this arp. Here are the envelopes. So you can see they're actually just kind of set like that. But then what's happening is they're at the same octave, and then I'm automating the fine tune on the second one. And you can see it's a pretty, no pun intended, but fine-tuned automation. We can see it just slowly rises up, and if I just put this in one place, you can see all that movement is gone. So this is what's creating that. So I definitely recommend, you know, try automating some different parameters like that. Like when you're working with FM, you can really automate almost anything. And it's going to not just be like the same as like if you just automated the detune with a subtractive synth, it would sound kind of weird. You would just hear the oscillators going really out of tune. But here it just creates this like crazy metal warping thing. So I really recommend playing with different parameters like that. As you can see, even a really simple sound like this can work well if you do that. And then we have the filter, which we just have a bit of the soft shaper. Here's without that. And then with it, just makes it a little bit more crunchy. And then the LFO, which is just slightly on the pitches of the oscillators. Here's without it. And then with it. So, it's a small thing, but actually that little bit of modulation is contributing a lot to the evil sound of this. Like, it's the vibrato just makes it feel kind of more warped and sort of dark sounding. Then we have this flanger. Here's without it. And with it. So you can hear the flanger is the thing that's creating that kind of metal resonance over top of the sound. And yeah, it's just a really great way to add some texture. I just have a really slow LFO with not really that much amount, but then it's this feedback is turned up so high. That's what creates the sound. And then we have an erosion. Here's without that. You can hear it just makes it even darker and more evil sounding. Then I have some echo, which is just giving it some space. I wanted to make sure with this one to just use delay. Like, with these kind of ARPs, I think if you use too much reverb, you could use a little bit, but if you use too much reverb, it's actually going to take away from the sound. I think that if you keep things a little bit, like, just more delay focused, it's a little bit cleaner. And then we just have some drum bus to fatten it up, and then finally a high pass filter, and then we have this drone. So this is playing that same note actually that the ARP was playing, but you can see this is just made using this FM patch. It's 3 sine waves, but then what it is I have the second one detuned a lot, and they're all at different octaves, and that's what's creating the sound. If I put that fine tune back down, see how it's super just flat? So that fine tune is a really good way to not just make things sound weird and different, but also, like, if you're trying to create a synth like this that doesn't just sound like it's like one note, like there's a lot of overtones, and there's something very complex there that makes it, you know, more exciting than just like, you know, 2 basic waveforms in FM, then like the detune is a really great way to do that, because yeah, it just adds so much like weirdness to the sound that you can't quite get when everything is perfectly in tune with the FM. Then you can see we have the low pass filter, and I actually have the LFO on that, as well as on the pitch of oscillator C. So if I turn off the LFO, you can hear the sound all of a sudden is kind of dull. So that's another thing. We got the fine tune turned up on that second oscillator, and on oscillator 3, the pitch is just constantly being moved. So it's a lot of that, and that's what's creating the movement. And then we just have some chorus, which you can see the feedback's up pretty high, so that's giving it kind of a nice texture. And we have some reverb as well, and then just some drum bus to fatten it up, a high pass filter, and then I have this auto pan, which just makes it sound like it's being sidechained to the kick. Because when you have a big boomy kick like this, where the bass is part of the kick, you can't really just have like things being sidechained to it, because it's too flat. So this auto pan is a really great way to make it sound like that. Then we have the stab. So you can hear that just hits every single, like right before the 2 and right before the 4. And so this is just made with some FM. It's playing E, or actually G, excuse me, but it's like, you can hear how that sounds musically with the ARP, what that creates. And then for the sound with this one, it's this FM sound made using a square wave and a sine wave. You can see the square wave, it's an octave below, and then the sine wave's an octave up. And then those, if you look at the envelope, you can also see the envelope is creating that stab that you hear. If I turn that up, it's not the same thing. So we have that, and then those are going into a low pass filter, which also has an envelope on it. So it's creating even more of a plug. Here's without the filter, and then with it, and then it's pretty simple after that. We just have a bit of echo and some drum bus, and then a high pass filter, where you can see, yeah, so we have the echo kind of giving some space, the drum bus just fattens it up, and then the high pass is just there to get rid of the lows, and then finally we have the kick. So I wanted to try something a little bit different here, where it's sort of like a rumble kick. You know, the bass is attached to the kick, but all that the bass is is it's just a really long 909 kick. As you know, like when you're working with a 909, if you've ever used one or seen one or used like Drumazon or like a similar plugin like that, you know that you don't have to use a short 909 kick. Like all those short 909 kicks that we hear, that's because that's just kind of the sound that a lot of people used. But there's a decay knob on the 909 that you can turn up, and it allows you to create these big booming boom, almost like 808 style kicks. And this works great because it's kind of the same thing as a rumble kick, right? Where it's like the bass from the kick is essentially the bass line in the track. And so that was the idea here, and I've heard this in a few Truncate tracks, definitely in a lot of Planetary assault systems, but a lot of people that make this style of techno do this. And the reason why, honestly, is just because it's simple. You know, it's the simplest way to create a bass line. Rather than going and trying to do a whole bunch of extra stuff and potentially messing up your track, you can kind of streamline things by having the kick and the bass sound like one element. And yeah, it just kind of makes the track a lot simpler. And in this style of techno, simplicity is everything. So the way I'm making this here is it's this one layer, which is sort of like the main 909, but then I have this clicky 909 too. So this is just this one sample. I'll turn off the high pass. You can hear that has a bunch of click to it. So I just took that and we just had that for the high end. And then they're just going into this drum bus. So here's without that. And then with it, obviously the boom really helps to create the bass here. And also just having these be saturated together so much is doing a lot. And then I had this utility here just to convert it to mono, because you want to make sure your bass is in mono. And it sounded like there was like some weird stereo stuff here. So I was just making sure. And yeah, there we are. So that is how you do it. That is how you make a track in the style. You know, it's all about just simple stuff. You know, lots of percussion that's all playing off of each other and keeping things pretty simple. But it's like the groove that you get when the different elements are talking to each other. And then just like making the nice like evil arp sounds and the stab and the drone and the kick bass. And you should be pretty well off. So that is going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video, as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there. It's already available. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.